welcome to this episode of the Scenic Astrology. My name is Makayla and I am the creator of the Scenic. We're here today with professional astrologer, historian, best-selling author, and creator of rulingplanets.com, Christopher Renstrom. Rulingplanets.com is an online, first-of-its-kind, interactive astrology magazine based on his best-selling book, Ruling Planets. Ruling Planets was first published in 2002 and has sold over 50,000 copies to date. Wow. His newest published, a lot. His newest published book, which has been really, really amazing to dive into and we'll discuss later, is called The Cosmic Calendar. It's been described as combining a deep knowledge of history with a wise and humorous take on the way we live now. An essential reading for anyone who wants a deep understanding of how to use astrology to get the most out of life. He currently writes the horoscope column for the San Francisco Chronicle and sfgate.com and the weekly horoscope columnist for astrologyhub.com. He created the horoscope column for Allure magazine, and he conceived and developed Ask the Astrologer for lifetimetv.com. You've done a lot.
I spend so much time in the future, I don't know what time zone I'm in.
Christopher has been practicing astrology since 1985 and regularly appears on radio and television while also lecturing across the United States on the history of astrology in America, which is why I invited him on the show today to talk to us about. So I'm really excited you're here, Christopher.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here too, Makayla. It's
Thank you.
A pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you. So what should we know about the history of astrology in America?
Lots. First of all, that there is one. No, I started researching it 1999, somewhere around then. And it hasn't been easy. I mean, because if you pick up a typical astrology book, you'll start in Mesopotamia and you'll make your way to Egypt, and you'll spend some time in Greece and Hellenized Egypt, and and if it's a good astrological history, you'll actually also spend some time in the Islamic school, which is such an important contributor to astrology. And then you go into Europe, and then you're in England, and then you're in modern day.
It's like that quick.
Right. It's just like, okay, we're in England, there's Alan Leo, and now it's modern day. And it's like nothing about America.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're lucky, you get one mention of Evangeline Adams and her court trial.
Oh, yes. I think that's like the one story I've heard. Yeah.
That's the one story, where she, proclaims triumphantly on the steps of a courthouse in Manhattan, astrology is a science, and then that's it. It's like, turn.
Oh. Did we lose you? Chris?
Rule in America.
When I lost you. There must have been like a internet.
There sometimes is.
Okay.
So feel free to be like, come back or repeat or whatever, because sometimes it, will like pick up and things like that.
We lost you at burning down, and then it went. She reclaimed that the building was burning. At least I know that part of the story. And then
about Evangeline Adams, where she, because usually it's just the moment of her on the steps of the courthouse in New York City saying astrology is a science, and everyone like, yay, it's legal, and things like this, and that's like her big moment of triumph. And yes, you're right. There is the Windsor Hotel burning, which she accurately forecasts and turns into a publicity campaign. But then after that, you turn the page, and then it's like modern day astrology and what's going on right now. So everything in America is really kind of like sidestepped or swept under the rug. And the fact of the matter is, astrology played an enormous role here in America, and America plays an enormous role in the development of astrology.
Oh yeah.
It's in America that you really have the beginning of psychological astrology. And the whole idea of astrology helping you to realize yourself as your own unique being, in terms of like, not only do I investigate myself psychologically or spiritually, astrological wise, but astrology actually has a role to play in my evolution as a person. Okay. And I think that these are still pretty much prevalent concepts here, but these are American in their origin, based in part on the unique relationship that America has to Christianity and God. America, as you know, is responsible for more versions of Christianity than any other country on this planet. We've got the Pentecostals, we have the Mormons, we have the Methodists, we have, the Seventh-day Advents, right? It's
yeah, yeah. We like our options, I guess, in America.
or our variations on a theme,
Yeah.
But what's in the kernel of American Christianity is the idea that I can know God myself.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm almost on a first name basis with God, and that lent itself to astrology here.
Yeah.
So where astrology in, for instance, like England or France or India, is still very much, and I'm talking about like late 19th century, early 20th century, where it was still very fate, not faith, but fate based, destiny based. Here in America, it was turning more into an emancipation of my spirit and a realization of myself as a total human being. And so astrology was feeding from currents like, I went up on it, but something thought, it's, what is it, mind thought? It's, I'm sorry, I sort of went up on, I have to look it up. I brought my notes today, so I wouldn't be a complete, because I knew I was going to be jumping all over the thing here. It's it's new thought.
Oh.
That was really difficult. Okay. But astrology in America here becomes inspired by New Thought. It becomes inspired by Swedenborgism, deism, so these sort of undercurrents in American religious/philosophical thought really kind of inspire, influence, and inform the way that astrology takes shape here, to produce what I just talked about, which is astrology addresses my evolution as a spiritual being, and that I would make the case is pretty much of an American origin.
Yeah. Wow, that's very interesting. I actually didn't know that. I didn't even realize that that was connected there with Christianity in that way. So I think I know that astrology was illegal too for quite a while. So do you know if the Christians that were kind of leading into astrology, like if they were practicing it kind of under the radar or trying to keep it?
No, it's actually the opposite. It's really quite funny, because with the work that I've done, astrology came over on the Mayflower. Okay, it came with the Puritans.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's not going to be exactly the way that we think of it, but astrology shows up in three versions. It shows up in the almanacs. Like, for instance, right now we're familiar with a farmer's almanac, and tell you about the sun and the moon and when to grow things or whatever.
Yeah.
But almanacs back in the Puritan period actually listed all the different planets. Okay. Oh. And they would list all the different aspects, and it was used to forecast weather.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so that's actually carrying over a British or an English tradition. So this comes over with the Puritans because, you want to know about the placement of the planets for the weather and how that's going to affect the influence of your life. I mean, influence is not particularly supernatural influences, although it's inferred psychological ones, but certainly influences in terms of weather and how that affects your being. The second way that it shows up is Culpeper's herbal. Are you familiar with Culpeper's herbal?
I'm not, no.
It's basically, if you go and Google it, you'll see it right away. And it used to sell in drugstores right next to the Farmer's Almanac. And basically these were herbal remedies that were to be used in case of, you know, cuts, bruises, illnesses, giving birth, things like this. What I think sometimes we forget is that the settlers who first come over here, there's nothing available that they were used to back in England. So there wasn't a drugstore down the street, around the corner, or anything like that.
Yeah.
So when they brought over Culpeper's herbal, which was basically how to identify medicinal herbs and then to apply them to, you know, seal a wound or help with a bone. In the original Culpeper, this kind of fell off over the years, but in the original Culpeper, you would pick these herbs according to a planetary transit. Okay, so you had to do it in a planetary hour and according to a planetary transit. Okay, so the first Culpeper herbals were actually also sold with the Culpeper's ephemeris. Okay.
Wow. I didn't even know that they did that, like back, like, I mean, because herbalism I feel is coming back now, even at least in my area in Rhode Island, I'm seeing these shops.
Rhode Island is ground zero for astrology in America, by the way.
I've like been learning this. It's awesome.
Yeah. So the thing is, they're not, now this is just to sort of distinguish it. They're not drawing up astrological charts to do this. What they're doing is that they're consulting an almanac to see, you know, where Saturn is, and is this a Saturn hour, and is this the appropriate time to pick this herb to maybe deal with a bruise or a chronic situation or a broken bone. Okay, so it's very utilitarian.
Yeah,
but it's astrology.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The third thing that came over on the boat on the Mayflower, and actually all the settlers, but primarily in the Massachusetts Bay colony, that's a big, as I said, ground zero for astrology here in America, as is Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. These are the two places where astrology here in America begins. The third thing that they bring over is something called the Book of Knowledge. And the Book of Knowledge was made up of,
I need this book.
Well, you can actually still get it on Amazon. You'll get, like, you know, a facsimile or whatever, but it was made up of like 5 parts. There was 4 parts, right? There was astrology, which was the first part. And the Book of Knowledge had been around since the 1500s in different versions or whatever, but by the time it comes over with the Puritans in the 1620s and the settling of America during that period of time, it's kind of like a household mainstay. And so the first part was astrology, which had the names and characters of the signs, the 12 houses, how you know people under these signs, but it also had the 5 aspects, the Ptolemaic aspects. It talked about how long the sun spent going through the signs, the good and evil days of the month, and that was tied into bloodletting. Okay, when you would let, or when you would let blood to cure an ailment or a fever, you did it according to when the moon was moving through a sign, and that sign was connected to a part of the body, the man of signs. Which, yeah, this is in almost every Puritan household, and it would have been like next to their Bible or their sermonette or whatever. It was never,
wow,
you know, anything spectacular. It was very mundane.
I'm mind blown, because it was just so, that was what they did. It was so normal, and then we lost the connection somewhere into these ancient healing techniques that were like, they worked for them. They worked, and then where did we disconnect from that?
At different places in different ways.
Yeah.
But I think what's really important to understand about this history is that it then reconnects for a period of time, only to maybe disconnect again. So there are these ongoing dark ages, followed by renaissances, followed by dark ages, followed by renaissances. You know, it's not, you know, like, oh, astrology, you know, was buried underneath the sands of Egypt like the Sphinx until it was just, no, it's not like that. It's always been around.
Yeah.
But so these are the 3 forms that it comes over. Also, the other parts of the Book of Knowledge dealt with the humors and the temperaments, with physiognomy, which is reading of the face, and palmistry. And then the final part was the farmer's calendar, which had weather prognostication, animal husbandry, crop husbandry, so what I really want to communicate to your audience today is that it was very utilitarian.
Yeah.
Okay, it was very like, you look it up to see if this is a good time to plant, a good time not to, a good time to pick herbs, how to administer these medicines. You have to remember, there are not a lot of doctors around, or the doctor that you came over on the boat might have passed away. So you had to fend for yourself here, with the bare basics. And astrology was part of that. It gave a sense of time and timing things and how to deal with weather, human condition in terms of health, and all these sorts of things. And so this tradition is preserved in America. During a little bit later than this period, it's like 1660, you have the Restoration. I don't know if you want to go into the whole thing, but there's an English Civil War that's fought. And this is where William Lilly, if you're familiar with that name, Christian astrology, it's okay.
Yeah.
This is where William Lilly becomes a household name, okay, because he's writing pamphlets in England during the height of the Civil War and, prophesying the end of the king and how political fortunes will change, and everyone's reading them like crazy. And this is mass astrology at its basic level.
Yeah.
And it actually takes on a very dangerous tone because he predicts encoded language or esoteric language, let's say that. He predicts the beheading of Charles. And actually some of his friends in Parliament used his astrological prognostication to set the date for the beheading of King Charles I.
Oh.
Okay, if that had gotten out, that would have meant the end
for him.
Of Lilly.
Yes, right.
And so Charles is beheaded. England descends into civil wars, and Lilly and the other astrologers, who were kind of like the Sean Hannitys of the time, or the Rachel Maddow of the time, but they were doing it with stars and prognostications. They all kind of go into a hiding, during the latter part of that period, so that when Charles II comes back and reinstates, the Restoration, he sets up the British, I think it's the British Science Society. It's the Royal Society of Science or something like that. They get rid of anything dealing with astrology or the occult. Now, they do this not because rationalism will prevail. They do this because the fascination with astrology and the occult and reading messages in the stars lent itself to the overthrow of his father. Okay, the public had gone crazy with that. And so it was dangerous. It's for the same reasons astrology was outlawed in Rome. Okay, and so the press is sequestered. Astrology is pretty much like wiped out. And so what happens, and why I'm even relating to this, is that think of transplanting a plant, right? You take it out of a pot and you move it to another pot and put it in, and it's a larger pot, so it will grow bigger, but it's not going to pick up and start growing right away. You have to give it some time, and this is what happens. Astrology transplants from Europe to America, where it takes on a life all of its own.
Yeah, that is a beautiful way to put that, actually. Yeah, that totally paints that picture for me. Yeah, because it's just like I understand like parts of our history and why it got disconnected at certain parts, and then the fear and things like that, and the transition and the religion and all these complex issues that come in interplaying with that. But it's so true. It's just like you uprooted it and then you tried to plant it in completely a new country, and they were fighting on all these different issues and terms, and they just went away with it for a little while.
But the irony is, okay, here's the ironic twist, and this is the thing that I love about astrology. Astrology loves irony. It's just, you have to have a really great sense of irony, as far as I'm concerned, to practice astrology, okay?
Check.
In Europe, it had been part of the academic curriculum until about maybe the 1610s, particularly in Germany. okay,
Oh.
when it's taken out. And this is the rise of the Enlightenment, the rationalist era, where there's going to be an emphasis on science, okay?
Yeah.
It's because America is so Christian obsessed
Yeah.
that astrology actually takes root and starts growing quite healthily here.
Yeah.
Okay. So in Europe, it's sequestered,
Yeah.
okay, but over here,
Wow.
it starts to take off. Okay,
Yeah.
now not right away. Okay, um, when Lily passes and there's kind of like this foot put on astrology over in England, the astrological texts from England dry up. And so America hadn't really developed its own school yet. So it was still reprinting the Book of Knowledge, all the way into the 1700s and the later 1700s. And then as you get into the late 1700s, early 1800s, you start seeing this resurgence of like dream almanacs and guides and things that told you what the meaning of your dream was last night. It's Freud before Freud.
Yeah.
And so, and this is where astrology starts reemerging again. But if you take a moment to really reflect on how powerful the role of prophecy is here in America, okay, we're taught that Puritans fled religious oppression in Europe, and they come to America so they can, and this is even held today, like I want the freedom of my religion and to believe what I believe and things like that. If you go and you look, for instance, at Mathers's sermons, okay, or the sermons of the other big preachers, they're here in America with the complete expectation that the second coming is around the corner. Okay, they didn't come here for religious freedom. They came here, Seward is one of them. Seward was completely convinced that the New Jerusalem was going to materialize in America.
Yeah.
So they came here with the expectation that the kingdom of God was going to, and not metaphorically.
Yeah.
Very literally.
Yeah. Right.
And so astrology becomes this kind of ally, okay, because it's about, can you read the signs correctly? Can you read the signs of the times correctly? Mathers had lots of astrology books in his library. In fact, he writes a paper where he tries to do the horoscope of like some other preacher who, just as a hobby, as a whim, as an amusement. Hobby.
Yeah.
As an amusement, and of course he fails at it and gets annoyed, but he still had his Culpeper. Yeah. He still had his copy of Lily. Yeah. He still had his Nathaniel Ames, who's a very famous Massachusetts astrologer, in the earlier in the more the colonial rather than the pre-revolutionary time. He still has them, and so astrology kind of feeds the imagination in terms of looking to the sky for signs and when's the time going to be. Did you work out the proper time? So rather than being stamped out, you can make a case for the Puritans being anti-papist, anti-Catholic, anti-Pope, okay, and calling that superstitious, a belief in saints and them administering and intervening in God's plan and things like that. But astrology, interestingly enough, was rather left alone. Okay. And it was even taught at Harvard.
Wow.
By the way. Yeah.
Wow. I did not know that either.
Yeah, it's in the encyclopedia. Right. It's Alstead. I think there's a city named in Rhode Island or Connecticut, Alstead, after him, but he penned the encyclopedia and has a whole section on astrology and reading the stars and the Star of Bethlehem and all these sorts of things. So there's this history of astrology here in America. And so America doesn't take on the same single-minded focus of the rationalist enlightenment that Europe does, okay? Because we hadn't been through all the religious wars, okay? A lot of people died. A lot of towns and were destroyed, and nations' treasuries bankrupted because of religious wars over in Europe. So there was a very strong motivation that everything is going to be scientifically based and rationalist and all of this stuff. You know, but in America, you have a scientific rationalism. Absolutely, it's coming out of Harvard and Yale and all these other places. But there's also a very stubborn, you know, evangelistic, you know, a belief, you know, in God and in the exceptionalism of America tied to God, because America is the new world, and this is where the kingdom of God is going to materialize. And hopefully some of these things sound as familiar to you as they do with tonight's news, because we are still, I mean, this was bred into the bone of America. You know, and people are still timing, you know, the end of the world, you know, oh, okay, it wasn't the rapture, we'll move on to another one, you know. I mean, even the Mayan prophecies, remember, Mayan prophecies are coming out of Latin America. That's still the new world. And so it's the new world, North and South America, I should really say, was seen in the fantasies of the people who settled here as being the place where God's kingdom was going to emerge.
This is fascinating. This is like, wow, like this is amazing. I had no idea about all this and the outlook on it and how, you know, it is embedded in us. It really truly is. And like I grew up, my family was like, you can have whatever religion you want, you know, we don't, they believe in God, but they don't go to church or whatever. They go to church for like 15-minute mass and stuff. So, but I would see everyone around me, it's just like, it's ingrained in them, you know, to believe. You're just automatically born to believe in a God here, at least I feel. Because like you might get the other options somewhere else, but yeah, it's that's fascinating.
Yeah. And astrology spoke to that. So so when people, because it's a pretty common assumption that astrology was thrown out because it was superstitious. What people forget is that astrology was as ubiquitous as a refrigerator calendar with these almanacs. People were referring to it every day. That's why they knew the signs. They knew the signs primarily from the Man of Signs, and it's still, I think, published today. Maybe you've seen it. It's a man figure, and Aries points at the head and Taurus is on the throat. It's a human figure where the signs point out different parts of the body that it rules. And again, this was done for the letting of blood, so that you didn't let blood when the moon was in that sign, because it would not stop bleeding, you know. So it always had this medicinal practice, and also its association to the weather. And if you're familiar with John Calvin of Calvinism, he the Calvinist religion, it's kind of like one of the predecessors to the Puritan movement. Calvin wrote a whole treatise on astrology where he talks about good versus bad astrology. Okay. And now this is archetypal Puritan guy. Okay. And good astrology, I mean, he's taking it from Thomas Aquinas, but good astrology was astrology that was connected to health and to weather. Okay. Whereas bad astrology was when you were trying to predict the future, because there you were being blasphemous. But for him to make a point that there's good and bad astrology, and that had been continued, it's not really until probably around the Revolutionary War and just afterwards that you really start seeing the astrology shaming, you know, that takes place. You know, there's a biographer of Lincoln who, you know, talks about Lincoln growing up in Kentucky, and where they still believe in astrology, and that the moon affects when you know, chop wood and things like that. You know, so that bashing starts a little bit later. But again, astrology kind of like had different enemies and allies at the same time. I mean, you know, the church was was against it because, you know, you do not predict God's will, which it's our job as a church to interpret for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then science went in and out with it as well, because weather predicting according to the placement of the planets went on, I think, well into the 1860s or 1880s. So there was, so that's what I really want to sort of like get across, is that it wasn't this stomped out secret science, brethren met with hoods in secret places, whispered about astrology.
Cave meetings and no.
Astrology is infinitely practical. It can sort of blend in and it can come back out again. And then if things get a little dicey, it can sort of blend in. And that's basically how it survived. Yeah.
So I'm interested then, since you've been practicing for a while, like how have you seen this shift over the couple last decades?
I think the couple last decades have really informed me a lot. Because when I began practicing, I didn't really know it at the time, and I'm still a little bit, but I began practicing, as I think you pointed out, in 1985 when your parents were born.
I was a zygote. Kidding. You're wonderful.
But that actually, according to academia, 1985 or the early 80s, is the beginning of New Age, is the beginning of New Ageism. Now, I personally would have started that in the late 70s. A lot of people would say, no, it's the 60s, 1968, Summer of Love, Age of Aquarius, it's on Broadway, But actually, according to academia, they're starting it in the early 80s. Okay. And so New Ageism was astrology, it's candles, it's incense burning, it's meditation, you're channeling past lives, you're channeling aliens from other planets, you're channeling prophets from other dimensions, and you're doing palmistry and everything you can think of. Right. Okay. And it's this idea that God is within you. That you were made in the image of God. And actually, this is an old Quaker tenet. And this actually is part of astrology's association with Quakerism in Pennsylvania. But the idea was that you were made in the image of God, which means that every human being on this planet is an image or a face of God. Okay. Which is very radical when applied, for instance, to abolitionism. Okay. How could you as a Christian own a slave if everyone is made in the image of God? Right. And so that was a conversation.
I know. Maybe a different podcast.
Right. But this was actually one of the cornerstones of New Age astrology or New Age alternative practices, was connecting with that divinity within and inside, and so in the 80s, this was the big thing. This is what we're doing. Shirley MacLaine writes, go tell it on the mountain, or don't fall off the mountain, or I don't know, Shirley MacLaine's, and she's channeling and getting into all of this, and all the religious, or at least the more conservative religious groups are like, oh my God, like Satan's back, and they're all going crazy, and and so, but so that was my first, that's the group that I started practicing with, or that's my culture.
Wow.
That's my culture. It then swings to a very Christian, very conservative Christian backlash. So astrology went from taking up like 4 vaults or whatever, 4 units or whatever they call bookshelves in a barn. They would take up like 4 to 6 units of Barnes and Noble. Okay.
Yeah.
To like, by the time it's the late 90s, 2 shelves.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the rest was
that quick too.
Oh, really quick. And and the rest of your spiritual section was end times and Christ, channeling Christ to, and what was fascinating was the way Christ was taking on these new age, like the religious prophecy of the time and the conservative bent still had a sort of it was packaged in a new age way.
Yeah.
And so they had borrowed elements from astrology to make it more popularized, but it had gotten into, everyone was waiting for end times and end of the world and Christ is coming back and all this, what do they call it? It's not called The Shining. It's called,
Might as well.
My Mercury in Sagittarius is working overtime today. What is it? The Rapture. Okay, that's what it's called. It's called The Rapture, and so that was the big thing. And then it goes underground or just sort of hangs out a while or whatever, and then it resurges. Whenever you have a change in media, you have an uptick in astrology.
Oh,
That
makes sense.
Yeah.
That literally makes sense.
Yeah.
Because people follow what they see on TV or believe what they see on TV.
Yeah.
Which I think was what's been a part of this whole COVID pandemic too now, is like, what is the truth? Right. So, or at least guiding people to find their own truth. Hopefully they're learning to ask questions for themselves, do their own knowledge digging.
And that's the beautiful thing about astrology that you just mentioned. And if I can just sort of like underscore that,
Sure.
Astrology is not a science. It's not a religion. Okay. Astrology is a calendar. That's why every civilization created some form of astrology. It's in order to tell time according to the planets. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, things might have been associated to that. Medical diagnoses were made based on planets. That's astrology's health, history, or festivals of saints were done according to old pagan holidays, which might have been connected to the planets, the change of season, that sort of thing. But astrology is not ever going to be scriptural.
Yeah, no.
Okay? It's never going to be dogmatic. We can sound that way, but it's never going to be dogmatic, because the sky script is always changing. Okay, and astrology is based on an interpretation. Interpretation leads you into critical thinking, or intuitive thinking, or imagination, or history. How did they see this before? And so these are the elements that astrology really brings out in the person. It's not going to say, here's a scripture, these are your do's or don'ts, and if you're in, you're in, if you're out, you're excommunicate. Astrology is never going to do that. It's always been democratic in its nature. If you could read the stars, you can practice astrology. And that, I think, is a beautiful gift. And that's something that, again, I think merged with an American, with, I don't know whether we call it the American spirit or the American lie that we tell ourselves these days, but it's something that merged with the American archetype or the American soul, okay? And so that's what makes astrology so, powerful. It's not the superstition. It's going to be the connection to prophecy. It's going to be the connection to finding divinity within. It's going to be the connection to standing outside the scripture or the law or the formula, to thinking or creating or visualizing for yourself with the sense that you're connecting to a higher purpose.
Yes.
These are things that were absolutely connected to astrology as it changed its alliances through our American history.
Yeah. I love that. I love how you just described and put all that together, because I deeply resonate with this. It's just like, it's something that I think anybody could get into and not be rejected and not have to feel like they're in a container, because the minute you start putting an archetype in a container, you're proved otherwise, and then the archetype manifests itself in something different, but it's still around that archetype. And it's just been fascinating for me over this last year to like watch all this unfold, and as I practice with my chart or my friend's chart, my fiance's chart, and I'm just like, oh, I see like this might happen. And I can't pinpoint it, but I can archetypally describe. And for them, like one of my best friends, she's an Aries. She's a lot of Aries, Sag rising, and she's a little
wow.
so much, there's a lot of fire, and she's brilliant. And she was like a little skeptical at first, but as I've been going through my process, I've been like pulling her in with me, and she's she's opening up to this, and she's seeing it unfold, and how it's not a religion, it's not a science. What is it? But it can manifest very real, and it can be so helpful. But like you said too, being able to connect into these imaginative parts of ourselves, these magical parts, or the parts that aren't tangible, but they're there within us. And that has been such a beautiful and spiritual and healing part of my life. I feel like once you go into it, it's like it's hard to turn around. Like you can't go back. It's like so life-changing.
So tell me about you. I mean, has astrology in this last year been like a solace, a comfort, insightful, revelation? You know, how is that, you know, because here you are, you've been under lockdown. We are experiencing, you are experiencing coming to age as an astrologer at this time. You know, so how is astrology, how do you think it's informing you in terms of like looking at society and life? I know those are heavy questions, but
Oh no, it's okay. Well, personally, it's been really self-assuring and reassuring, and it's put together or closed or made some bridges, at least in different parts of my life and myself that were disconnected, and it helped me put those pieces together more. That you know, I had been in therapy before and stuff, but actually being able to dive into my chart and dig a little deeper and then sit with it and meditate on it has been extremely empowering and helpful. And I just feel like I'm the best version of myself right now that I've ever been. And yes, and I want to be able to give that back, because I see this society, I see it in two ways, or a couple ways, but I see that there's a lot, at least in my area, and if you know Rhode Island, it's pretty hip, it's pretty spiritual, and it's pretty up on the trends, and it's open, it's pretty open.
it's always been revolutionary.
Totally, right? And
Yeah.
and it's a way for people to heal, and I see it as such a way to bring people together, to have, to hold more space for other people to be themselves, while also realizing that we're still all connected, and that we're still intertwined. And I don't know, I mean, over the last year too, I feel like I've just seen it become a lot more popular. And I'm not sure if it's the online interaction that the world's moving towards. Yeah. Which I personally love, because you get to work from home with your dogs. So
I know. It's definitely a plus.
I don't want to go back. But yeah, it's been so beneficial. And even for people like my fiance, like he's been working with his chart and he's been totally open to it, and it's helped him. And then we played around with the lectional stuff, and then I had fun with it, like doing new moon stuff. And it's wild, like setting an intention on a new moon and then seeing it a half a year later at the full. And I'm like, you babe, like you do know that like this is in full picture what we set an intention for a year ago. It's like, it's amazing.
Well, it's wonderful. And it's important that I think people understand it's not about wish fulfillment, but about the timing.
Yeah.
You know, which is what you were talking about. You know, you plant your seed, or you plant your intention, you know, at that moon. And then, you know, and it's so important that, I mean, you know, it's, anyway, I just felt like that's something I needed to really underscore, that this isn't just like wishing on a star, you know, which a lot of people think astrology is, but it's actually about working in sync and in synchronicity with whatever you call it, God, the universal mind, nature,
right,
planets,
tuning in. Right, exactly. Yeah. What was I going to say about that? I also think it's given me reassurance over like certain events that come up. Like real quick story is Mars, transiting Mars had squared my natal Mars, and transiting Mars had just moved into my 8th house, squaring my natal Mars, and in my 5th. But I was rushing in the morning, and I wasn't giving myself enough time for my routine. So I I was just super rushed. I ended up backing into my neighbor's car, which
Oh,
eighth house like debt with, somebody else. So, and it was okay. And she was super lovely and nice. But then I looked at my chart after and I was like, okay, I understand that this happened because I was in a rush.
mm-hmm.
And the underlying meaning was actually, I need to stop sleeping until noon and wake up. You wake up a little earlier in the morning.
Might help with that rush thing.
But it was like a very literal lesson for me. And instead of being frustrated, I was like, hey, thanks, Mars.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, it opens you up to the world around you. It opens you up to the time around you. It opens you up to,
yeah.
Because synchronicities are ultimately going to be about relationships, with the give and take, and it just, I just think it's just such a beautiful, well, I don't need to proselytize or whatever. I just think it's a beautiful art form. And I think it's one of the greatest things that our society or our civilization has ever created is astrology.
So I guess we should lead into this then with your new book.
Oh, okay.
That I've been
Oh,
loving.
yeah, that.
Oh yeah, this. No, so this is your new book. So did you write this last year?
Yeah.
Yes.
I started, I signed, I think it was 2018, 2019, and then it came out in 2020. I don't know. It's such a blur. I signed for 2 books. So I'm like working, I'm on manuscript number 2. So it's like,
Congratulations.
Like,
That's
you.
awesome. You're going to have 3 books. That's insane.
Yeah.
I know it's a hard process because I'm trying to work on one myself. But this
Are you writing daily? Do you ever feel like writing daily, weekly, or monthly horoscopes?
Yes.
Are you starting with them at all?
I write on Medium. So I just write on, like, right now I've just been writing whatever sparks my creation with the current stuff. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if you can get yourself to write like a monthly or a weekly or daily horoscope, it's like a pianist doing exercises. It's a wonderful way to acquaint yourself with the planets.
Yes.
And to also speak. And I'm always telling people to do this because it's just a wonderful way to really perfect all of that. Not perfect, like make it perfect. You'll never do that, but to really hone the talents and things like that. And then you really start seeing how.
Yeah, because you write like a daily, right? A daily. So
and a weekly.
Does it just come out for you? Just
at this point, yes.
Yeah.
I used to slave over every word or whatever. But what's really nice is that I've been writing horoscopes since, okay, your parents got engaged. 1997, since your parents got engaged.
Okay.
Actually, no, earlier. No, 91 was monthly horoscopes for Allure magazine, which was Condé Nast.
Wow.
And then those were monthlies, and then I added dailies.
Yeah.
But you build the muscles over a period of time.
Yeah.
And that's why I so recommend it to astrologers, because you can really write, and work with interpretations, and it's just a tremendous exercise. But yeah, you build muscles, so that you can
well, it shows, because like I've read a lot of books, like totally so many books, cookbooks.
You're
and then
going to write books.
I am
write books, I can tell.
Get there. But the way that you describe, like for instance, Aries, I never heard somebody else describe so accurately. I felt I resonated with that. My Aries sun, really, truly. You talked about the coach dad thing, and maybe not always wanting to be in the leadership. And I was always given leadership, but I always would rather support somebody who yes, I swear. And I'm like reading this and I'm like,
it's
oh
why you're
my
engaged to a Leo. It's why you're engaged to a Leo.
it's true. It's
Because
true.
you know the Leo's going to step into the leadership.
Oh, he's such a leader too. And I'm like, I'll support you, babe, whatever you want. I'm the
Right.
muscle, you know?
Right.
Yeah. He's the
I'll enforce it.
So, I mean, I think this book, for all the listeners, I think this book is extremely helpful. It's something, if you're a newbie, completely newbie, or practicing astrologer, I'm like literally using it all the time. So
Oh.
yeah, I love it.
Makayla, you're making my heart sing, because
Oh.
it's always a mission for me to talk to the people who are starting out.
Yep.
Because I think everyone starting out gets like the basics, you know, in a sort of like, here are the basics, you know, and it's like, excuse me, everyone's like learning a language and a worldview here. You don't like sort of dish out the basics like, you know,
Yeah.
baby food. I mean, like babies are fed better, you know, or treated with more, you know, and then it's like, here's the basics, and now like deep end, you know, like,
That's true.
you know, Mercury's out of bounds.
Oh, you don't
Or
know?
it's contra-parallel. You know, and it's just, oh my God, I feel so sorry for people starting astrology these days. It's scary. I mean, like I practiced it for years. It's scary. I mean, some of what's like, do you know what the dark moon Lilith in conjunct this is really supposed to be portending?
I
And
heard
what about those 23 asteroids?
I heard that the other day, the dark moon. I'm like, what the hell is the dark moon? Why is another moon? Yeah, it's like, hold on, my brain can only take so much. Oh, that's
Right.
so,
Like,
so how did you teach yourself, and how do you keep up with your knowledge?
I was really fortunate. I studied under my mentor,
Okay. Yeah.
who was just,
Yeah.
she just passed away recently, God bless her. And but I was so lucky to study under her. I was 18.
Yep.
In New York City. I had just moved from Menlo Park, California,
Yep.
to New York City to attend the Juilliard School of Drama. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. You know, I was in the same class as Liz McGovern. If you know her from, I think, Downton Abbey. She's the mother on Downton Abbey, and not the granddam, but the mother in Downton. Kevin Spacey, Val Kilmer. You know, these were like, you know, they had their SAG cards. Kelly McGillis, they had done TV things or whatever. You know, 6 months to my showing up at the Juilliard, I was in a tiger suit spelling out T-I-double-G-R at some kid's birthday party. Okay, it's like, you know, and then suddenly
I love it. Can you come to my birthday and do that?
There you are. Make something with it. And so I didn't know a soul in New York. I just known suburban California. I'm in Manhattan, you know, and a friend of mine at school, Kevin Bryan, is like, hey, you know, here's this pamphlet of astrology. You want to come with me and see what that's about? I'm like, okay, you know, and she was delightful. I mean, he spoke with a lisp. Yeah, he smoked cigarette.
Love it.
She always had baked goods because she knew like the starving artist hadn't eaten. So Carolyn would always have like baked goods, and you would sit there with your binders and things, and she would sit in front of the chart, or maybe sometimes in her big round back straw back chair, and she would point out to things and stuff like that, and we'd do the charts of people we didn't know, and she'd be like, yes, you guessed correctly, it is a serial killer.
Really? She sounds delightful.
She was completely delightful, and she was like so many astrologers in New York at the time, kind of still are, hodgepodgey. You know, there wasn't one school. You picked up different things from different people, but the prevailing thing at that time was humanistic astrology, or more particularly Jungian astrology. Liz Green was very popular then.
Oh yeah.
So we were learning all about the archetypes. It's not archetype, it's archetype. Okay, so we were learning all about the archetypes and our shadow selves and transformative powers and all these sorts of things. You know, you're 18, and so you're going down with it.
Yep.
But what she always came back to, she always came back to the chart. If you were going to, you know, talk about something, you know, I think this is whatever, could you please point it out on the chart? You know, she would make you couldn't just like, you know, I'm gonna like, you know, channel Ramtha for this one. No, you had to point out on the chart what you were seeing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
And then she also taught the responsibility of reading for someone, you know, and the gift of listening. That if you are reading for someone, someone is putting their lives into your hands, you know, even if it's a 15-minute quickie at a party, it's, you know, they're doing that. And also listening, the gift of listening to the person, not telling them what they want to ask about or changing the reading around, but connecting to the person and truly listening and finding that on the chart. So humanistic astrology was very popular at that time, and it really blended counseling and astrology together, whether you were a counselor or not. But it taught you what I found invaluable: counseling skills, listening skills, along with the respect of reading for someone. And in those days, remember, no internet, so you read for someone face to face.
And you did your own chart calculations, am I?
My dear, by hand and in books. Oh
I'm
yeah.
thankful. Like,
You had two huge, you had a big red hardback ephemeris, and then you had a big blue hardback longitudes and latitudes.
you got
Hold
one?
on just a sec.
Oh, you got one still? Oh, come on, even the old school binder. Oh, this is awesome. Oh gosh, is that really when you first began?
These are the opening.
You did a beautiful art. It's like so perfect.
You know, I would cut out images that I would associate to the planets and things like that. That's Glenda Jackson from Women in Love.
Oh, wow.
And you would work out all the, you know, the
much
dignities
different
and
now.
things like that. And what you also did was, this is back when I could actually write, when I had penmanship. But let's see if I can still, there's the increases in light, decreases in light. I won't, you know, bore you with the whole thing, but
this is so cool though.
These were your calculations. This is how you calculated a chart.
Wow.
Okay.
That's fascinating.
And you had to do it, calculations. You had to do it by hand.
Wow. And you can't mess up because, you know,
no, you can't.
The littlest detail will totally, completely, you know, arrange stuff possibly. So,
well, especially when people are coming with their own astrological charts and comparing yours to the one they just had.
Oh no.
Hello.
What an adventure.
Yeah, you really could not mess up.
So when the first astrology program came out, like the software, were you just skipping around and like jumping for joy?
My dear, I was skipping around when the computer came out. Okay, because you have to remember when I was at, I transferred from Juilliard to NYU for playwriting. Okay. I was still on typewriters. Have you ever been on a typewriter?
No.
Okay.
Yep.
You're typing, right? Well, you know, you're typing like a keyboard, but you could type the wrong letter like a bazillion times. You would have to take the cartridge out of the typewriter, put in the whiteout, go back over your line, type over the word that you misspelled in the whiteout, take the whiteout cartridge out, put the typewriter cartridge back in, and continue.
It's not enough time for that.
There is so not enough time for that. Okay. So I think computers made me a writer. And then, but we associate computer charts to software and things like that. There are actually computer charts in the 70s that were being done. There was a big computer bank in Grand Central Station in New York City. I've seen photographs where you could go and put in the information, and your chart was computer generated. I mean, typed out. Computer generated mean like you sat there while the computer typed out your chart report. Okay, it's not like, oh, ding, there it is, print. No, you sat there.
Oh my
And you
Times have changed.
and you were handed like a thick folder for your chart. I was like, read it. Next.
My luck, it would be like raining that day and it would get all wet and I'd have to go back and do it again.
Being a Capricorn, my luck would be that it caught.
Oh, yes.
Again and again and again. And they'd have to go and open it up and get the maintenance person and fix it.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So you've been through it all for sure. Oh.
That's the astrology I grew up with. Wow. Okay. And but it was wonderful. I never had an interest in math, although on my SATs, for some reason, I did better in math than English, go figure. But astrology taught me math like nobody's business, because it's all, and it taught good math, not theoretical, my mind went numb, but how to skip around a chart and move around it, know.
Yeah. Like limited numbers too, you can never go too far out. I agree, because I don't doubt math.
We talk about all the aspects are geometrical aspects, okay, and we talk about a trine, right? And that comes from trigon, and that's actually where we get trigonometry, which was invented by Hipparchus, I think, a Greek astrologer. They say astronomer. There was no such thing, astrologer, and he invented it to predict eclipse cycles.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow. So for anybody listening, if you don't think it's all connected, it's all connected.
It's all connected. Well, and that's also, I mean, since we're like jumping around, but when people are like, oh, astrologers were burned at the stake like witches or whatever, it's like, not really. I mean, you've got your Bruno, but that was different. That was because he was a heretic. But no, astrologers, like you could have people practicing witchcraft, or you could have people practicing herbology or all these sorts of things. But if you were an astrologer, you had to be book learned, because there's no way you could cast a horoscope unless you knew
how to
math.
do that. Yeah.
Well, unless you could do the calculations.
I love that. That's so cool that you still have that you kept that.
Oh, of course.
You have to. I know. You should frame like some of the pieces that's awesome. That's really
my cool. Old tome.
It's all neat too. Like
I have to blow the desk. Oh, I don't even know the person who wrote that. I mean, like, you should see my hideous. I mean, like, doctors are more legible with their prescriptions than my handwriting these days.
That's funny. Oh my goodness. Well, you have been delightful, just absolutely wonderful. Do you
you've been delightful.
Thank you. Do you offer readings still, or do you just?
Yeah.
Okay, so people can book with you for a reading if they want it on Ruling Planets.
You go to rulingplanets.com and go ahead and book a reading. It's a couple of months away. I mean, they should know that. I mean, I think I've got openings in July right now, or
good for
something
you.
Like that. But I believe in it. I know that some of my contemporaries have stopped. They've become, the uber, and they're fabulous. We just love Jessica and Shani, but I know that they've kind of like stopped on that, and I'm kind of like, I hope that they don't, or they'll pick it up again, because I think it's such an important, a pianist is always practicing the piano. That's what I like to say. And I think reading is so important to practice, so that you, and that connection to another person face to face is so important. And I hope, I mean, okay, I'm gonna, kids these days, but I hope that, there are opportunities for younger astrologers to read in person. It's so important, to have that. You know this, but do you do most of your, well, you're going to do most of your readings on Zoom or the phone because we're on lockdown, but it sounds like you started really with astrology when we went into lockdown, right?
Yeah, it was in the summer. Yeah. Okay. But I understand what you're saying. Like, I was a bartender for 10 years, for instance.
Honey,
So
you're an astrologer. If you're a bartender, you're an astrologer. Okay.
yeah, yes. And
There's like 90% of the skill set right there.
it is. It's so people oriented,
Hmm.
and just understanding people and knowing people. And yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you on that. And it's completely different as is over on Zoom, which is amazing for so many reasons, but it does take away some parts of that energy, I guess you
Yeah,
could say.
energy.
Which we still get with my fiance and I with the students at the flight school. Like it's a very, you can't teach people to fly on Zoom, but thank
Zoom
God.
means, Zoom means something different when you're in an airplane.
Yes, it does. Well, you don't know. I mean, we had a student come in, and he was he was well versed in the video game and flying an Air 737. So was definitely sure he could fly the airplane because he knew how to fly on the video game. And I'm just like, it's very, very different. It's
Wow. So what
very
was
different.
that like? I mean,
Scary for the
yeah.
instructor.
You think learning to drive was bad?
Right, right. Yeah, no, but so you hope that astrologers will get to do like the one-on-one.
Have that person to person. And Makayla, please correct me because I might be, well, I'm probably wrong on this, but the impression that I have is that there's a very heavy technique, different techniques
Hmm.
that are being taught, and I don't know how much of the conversation is being taught.
Hmm.
You know, do
So
you know what I mean by that?
yes, but I will say that Tony Howard at my school at Astrology University, he is teaching all the techniques. Like he's incorporating so many different instructors, teachers in the curriculum. And
Hmm.
from my perspective, like he's like my favorite teacher there.
Good. Tony's lovely. I love Tony.
Because he gets people, I think, too, and he has that background and those people skills. And so I'm only in year one, so I'm not there yet, but I think he's hinted like towards the next couple of years that they start to do the work with readings, like chart consultation kind of
Right.
stuff and those
Good.
dynamics.
Good. I love Tony. Tony is an amazing listener.
Yeah.
And an observer. It's just, he's just, he used to dance.
I know. I wonder
Yeah.
if his ears are ringing right now. It's so
I know
funny.
they should be, because we love you, Tony Howard.
We love you.
We love you, Tony Howard.
Awesome.
That gives me great. I mean, just hearing that you're with Tony Howard makes me very happy, but also that Tony's bringing in that element, because, and again, I'm just like looking at what comes over a feed or whatever, but it just seems really technique, and it's like, okay, but
Yeah, I know. I totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, and that's where I get a little bit like, oh,
We should be, well, maybe this isn't the right word, but multivalent. And it's only because I've read this word so many times in Cosmos and Psyche. But maybe we should be multivalent with the way that we approach astrology, and that all the techniques. Like for me at least, I want to learn it all so I
right.
can adjust or formulate or apply it when it needs to be, or with the right person, or
Mhm.
it's really going to depend on the person.
What does multivalent mean? That's such a marvelous word.
Should I Google it? I
Yeah.
don't want to say like the
No. And I love that you're so Aries that way, because Aries is the zodiac sign that will go and look up the word that everyone needs to know.
very
You know
direct.
that, don't you? I always use that. Yeah.
I have to be direct. I can't help it. So
It's also the commitment to self-improvement with Aries. Aries is always, I
yeah,
can be better. How do I make myself better at this?
I do feel like that. I do. So ready?
Yeah.
Having a susceptible of many applications, interpretations, meanings, or values.
One more time again in English.
Having a susceptible of many applications, interpretations, meanings, or values.
Having a susceptible?
Yeah. Or visually complex and multivalent work. Having several sites at which attachment to an antibody, well, that doesn't apply.
That's medical. It sounds
That's
biological, that
medicine.
one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. More definitions.
Good. One I can wrap my mind around.
Polyvalent, that doesn't help.
Right.
Represented more than twice in the somatic chromosome number, multivalent. We're gonna have to get back to everybody on this word.
Call up Rick. Email Rick. Oh my God, I'm seeing his wife Yvonne tomorrow. Shall I ask her?
Yes. Yes.
Hey, wait. I have to ask. Right. I'm on a meeting with her tomorrow. I have to ask. Okay. Well, okay. I'm going to ask Yvonne. Okay. What is it again? Multivalent?
Multivalent. Yeah. And I think it means like having a couple or multiple layers. That's what I would think when I hear the word, but I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, it made me kind of think of different social platforms. I mean, it's not that, but metaphorically, like different platforms or different access points where you're receiving or taking in.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's how they were using susceptible. Okay. She's gonna like be so like but okay. So what is multivalent? multivalent, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Like multivitamin, but spelled differently.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, you definitely have to let me know what she said.
I'm definitely telling you. Okay.
Yes. And then we'll get back to the community on what it means in the next video.
Right. I could just see her like, Rick on the wall.
He's like,
what's
probably
multivalent?
Like, whatever.
Walking the dog.
He does have an impeccable vocabulary.
I'm sure he's going to be able to answer. I'm sure he's going to use susceptible in a sentence like that.
Die. Just forget it.
Oh no, I'm obnoxious. English. Simple words I can understand. I believe in that. Be honest about what you're not understanding.
Yes.
You know, nothing's gained by not asking that question.
There's nothing wrong with not knowing. Totally.
It's a great place to be. Because sometimes it's bliss and sometimes it's the beginning of an intellectual journey.
This is the beginning of that journey. Oh my God.
Less Moore's journey.
I'm really wondering because I've read this word like 50 times in one chapter. So, and I just had this one vision of what this word meant. So I might have to reread the chapter after.
I think it's being receptive to different ways of exposure, processing,
dimensions, layers, or sounds good.
Okay. Multivalent.
Well, thank you so much for being
here.
Thank you so much,
Makayla.
I know you have a meeting like in 3 minutes, so I want to keep you, but I had so much fun with you today, so thank you so much.
I had so much fun with you today.
Good. I'm so glad.
You fabulously multivalent person. I hope that's okay. I hope I didn't like end with an insult.
It's fine.
Okay.
I do hope I see you maybe in Salt Lake, right? Utah.
Please do, and email me. You've got the Batcave email address, so email and say hi. Don't be a stranger.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
Take care.
You take care too, Makayla, and thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for tuning in to the Scenic Astrology. I will be back again for more.
Okay. Bye. I will too. I'll be watching.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.